Welcome back to the Archive, History Detectives. If you've been traveling with us through the bleak, blood-slicked landscape of 1941 Northeast China, you know that our good primary guide through this historical meat grinder, a sharp-witted young military translator named Cheng Bao, has just returned from a massive winter camp inspection tour along the Siberian frontier. In our last episode, we witnessed the ultimate display of raw fish diplomacy inside a drafty warehouse in Jammusi, where a single plate of freshly sliced, beautifully seasoned raw carp turned a pack of terrifying Japanese military auditors into ravenous happy gluttons, completely saving a young local lieutenant's career. With their bellies full of premium river fish and black market liquor, the Imperial High Command boarded their ironclad flagship, the Yangmen, and steamed gracefully down the Songhua River, riding a wave of alcohol back to their central headquarters in Harbin. But as the warship docked, the atmosphere shifted from a triumphant military theater to something profoundly surreal, chaotic, and deeply personal. Today, we are opening the books on Chapter 8 of Cheng Bao's deathbed memoir. He titled this specific episode with a powerful classical phrase, Qian Kun Diandao, or as we would translate it for our Western audience, the world turned upside down. For my American history buffs tuning in, that phrase should ring a major bell. The world turned upside down was the legendary British ballad famously played by King George's army during their surrender to George Washington at the Battle of Yorktown. It represents that terrifying, that disorienting historical moment when the old rules evaporate, the social order flips on its head, the masters become the servants, and the world loses its collective mind. And in the winter of 1941, Cheng Bao's world didn't just turn upside down, it went completely off the rails. In this chapter, we are going to witness a bizarre and tragicomic sequence of events where our protagonist undergoes a radical transformation. We will watch him suffer a brutal, humiliating public assault by a corrupt occupier, execute a brilliant mafia-style midnight revenge plot, and then, in a stunning twist of cosmic irony, watch this high-ranking, silk-suited military official step into the freezing snow to act as a low-end manual laborer for a dying neighbor. This is history at its most raw, honest, and profoundly human. So, lock your doors. Let's stoke the fireplace, and let's dive into the world turned upside down. It is the early winter of 1941, and a jagged, translucent sheet of thin ice has begun to choke the banks of the Songhua River. The wind coming out off the northern plains carries a deep, bone-chilling frost. As the flagship Yangmen glides against the concrete docks of the Harbin Naval Command, the surrounding sister warships unleash a grand chorus of steam whistles to welcome the delegation home. It has all the markings of a grand military triumph. But our towering, eccentric, the commander, Admiral Yin the Bearded, refuses to step off the boat. Why? Because the old warlord is deeply, hopelessly superstitious. He operates under a strict ancient personal code. Never deploy on a day ending in 7, never return on a day ending in 8. As fate would have it, the lunar calendar date of their arrival ends in an
absolute.
Terrified of breaking his cosmic taboo, Admiral Yin orders his servants to unload his massive wooden crates of oranges, which we know were actually been packed to the brim with black market contraband opium, and send them directly to his private estate. But the Admiral himself stays behind, locking the doors of his command cabin and going to sleep for days right inside the base, refusing to set foot on land until the calendar page turns. Cheng Bao, however, doesn't care about ancient numerology. He grabs his leather suitcase, tucks the ancient notch Japanese katana he received from his old history professor safely under his arm, mounts his battered old bicycle, and pedals furiously through the snow toward his family home. He bursts through the front door, throwing his arms around his pregnant wife and greeting his family with a heart full of warmth. He is a young man on the rise, a successful official who has secured his family's survival in a brutal world. But as he unbuttons his tailored wool coat and looks over at the wooden windowsill, his joy instantly evaporates. Resting in the gray winter light is his elderly father's favorite glass liquor bottle. It is bone dry, completely empty. For our Western listeners, you have to understand that during the devastating wartime shortages of 1941, premium alcohol was a highly rationed, incredibly scarce commodity. Cheng Bao's father had survived the economic collapse of his family by clinging to one single comforting vice, a small glass of high-grade liquor at the end of a long day. To Cheng Bao, seeing that empty bottle felt like a personal failure. He was a first-class military translator earning top dollar, yet his own father was sitting in a cold room with an empty glass. The very next morning, Cheng Bao grabs two massive ceramic jugs, slips them into a woven basket, and walks down the snowy avenue toward a prominent local establishment known as the Zhengsheng Distillery. The distillery, it is a strange, imposing place. Its heavy wooden front doors kept permanently bolted, radiating an aura of dark criminal secrecy. Cheng Bao bangs heavily on the wood until a small viewing slit slides open, and he is let inside. He steps up to the high wooden counter, straightens his posture, and prepares to use his high military and status to secure the best stock in the house. But the man sitting behind the ledger is a ruthless, arrogant clerk whose face is completely covered in deep pitted pockmarks. The pockmarked clerk looks at Cheng Bao's youth, scoffs with absolute disdain, and sneers we're completely out of the good stuff. If you want alcohol, I can give you 3 pounds of our lowest grade watered down swill. Take it or leave it. Cheng Bao's blood begins to boil. He's a proud, elite official of the River Command. He opens his mouth to deliver a furious, high-ranking lecture to this arrogant shopkeeper, but before he can utter a single syllable, the peace of the room is shattered. Stumbling through the entrance, reeking of cheap alcohol and radiating pure, unadulterated imperial malice, that is a Japanese gendarmerie corporal named Sergeant Sawada. Sawada is a thuggish military policeman wearing a heavy winter trench coat, without asking a single question. Without a word of dialogue, Sawada spots the young Chinese man standing at the counter, lunges forward, and delivers an absolute bomb of an open-handed slap directly across Cheng Bao's face. The force of the blow sends Cheng Bao stumbling backward into the wooden rafters, his vision spinning, sparks dancing in his eyes as a searing, white, hot pain erupts across the left side of his face. And the wealthy owner of the establishment, old Yu, slowly paces out from the back warehouse wearing a luxurious satin skullcap. He looks down at the bleeding, humiliated translator, lets out a cold, mocking laugh, and delivers a sneering piece of advice. Junior, you just learned a valuable lesson about eating a loss. If you're that smart, go pick up your basket and run along before the sergeant decides to break your ribs. Cheng Bao picks up his empty jugs, walks out into the blinding snow, his face burning, his body shaking with a level of rage he has never experienced in his entire life. As he wipes the blood from his lip, he looks back at the distillery, doors and fires a sacred oath into the winter wind. If I do not hunt you bastards down and claim my vengeance for this slap, I swear I will never close my eyes in death. But before Cheng Bao can launch a street war, he has to navigate a massive structural revolution inside his own military base. The bureaucratic takeover we teased in our last episode is officially concluded. The gleaming copper plaque of the Navy has been tossed into the scrap heap, replaced by the heavy wooden sign of the Greater Manchu Empire River Army Headquarters. The crisp, elegant, deep blue naval uniforms have been completely banished. In their place is an absolute sea of muddy khaki drab Japanese army wool and wave of aggressive battle hardened Japanese land army officers has swarmed into the complex, strutting through the corridors in knee-high riding boots, dragging their long swords against the walls, completely treating the old naval veterans like second-class citizens. Xingbao's beautiful private desk is pushed directly into a dark, dusty corner of the office. In this hostile new environment, a lesser man would have been chewed up and discarded, but Chungbao is a psychological chameleon. He deploys his upgraded new manual of flattery with absolute master-level precision. He learns exactly how to bow to the new army colonels, how to anticipate their administrative needs, and how to make his flawless bilingual skills indispensable to the new command structure. Instead of being demoted, Cheng Bao pulls off a stunning bureaucratic victory. The new army administration is so impressed by his intellect that they concurrently appoint him as the chief translator for the elite military legal department. This promotion doesn't just solidify his security, it adds a massive 20 yuan allowance to his monthly salary, with his pockets full of cash and his official authority reaching an all-time high. Chung Bao realizes the hour has finally arrived to collect his debt from the Zhengsheng distillery. Da tracks down his rogue gendarme assistant friend, Xiao Zhenjiang, the dangerous street enforcer we met during the epic tavern brawl in Chapter 3. Over a table of hot food, Xiao maps out the enemy's entire defense network. He reveals that Corporal Sawada is nothing but a functional alcoholic who spends his days drinking government supply liquor. And the source of Old Yu's untouchable arrogance, his private nephew happens to be a personal staff driver for the Gendarmerie High Command. That was their entire shield. Cheng Bao smiles, leans back, and orchestrates a brilliant two-phase counter-strike. Phase 1 is isolation. He throws a massive, lavish party for Corporal Sawada, showering the Japanese officer with infinite amounts of free black market alcohol until the man is completely comatose, that's blacked out, and sent a brothel entirely, cutting off the distillery's emergency military protection. Phase 2 occurs on a quiet Friday evening. Cheng Bao is the official officer on duty at the base, giving him total control of the military motor pool. He walks into the barracks and recruits 4 of the largest, the most intimidating naval bodyguards from the adjutant's office. Leading the squad is a giant, that hulking coal shoveler popularly known as Big Lou, a man built like a brick wall with fists the size of ham hocks. The 5 men fire up a heavy, roaring military tricycle motorcycle, pile into the carriage, and tear through the snow-covered streets of Harbin, like a mafia-hit squad on wheels. The heavy wooden doors of the Zhengsheng distillery are violently kicked off their latches, crashing against the interior walls. Before the staff can even realize what has happened, the giant sailor, Big Lou, lunges across the room, rips the main telephone lines directly out of the wall, and blocks the exit with his massive frame. Cheng Bao steps into the center of the dim room, his tailored officer's coat flowing behind him, his boots clicking sharply on the floorboards. He strides directly into the accountant's. Back office eyes locking onto the pockmarked clerk who had mocked him days earlier. Before the clerk can utter a sound, Cheng Bao reaches across the desk, grabs the man by his wool collar, lifts his entire body off his chair, and unleashes a ferocious roar. You miserable old bastard. Look at my face. Do you remember me now, tonight? I am collecting the interest for that slap. Cheng Bao channels every ounce of his pent-up humiliation, rage, and survival anxiety into a massive, full-force right hook directly into the clerk's left jaw. The blow is so devastating it sends the pockmarked man flying across the office. That's right, crashing hard into a stack of ledger shelves, knocking him out cold on the floor. You, the wealthy owner, dashes out of the back room, his face turning an absolute shade of chalky white as he sees the armed naval bodyguards standing over his bleeding clerk. The arrogant merchant instantly loses his mind with terror, dropping to his knees, trembling violently and bowing frantically until his forehead hits the floorboards. He begs for his life, screaming for mercy, and orders his workers to immediately drag out their finest stock. Workers emerge carrying a massive wicker-wrapped vintage wooden barrel filled to the brim with over 30 pounds of premium. That top shelf, white liquor. And Chang-Bao looks down at the cowering owner, reaches into his pocket, and casually tosses a single 10-yuan bill directly onto the floorboards. He lets out a cold, chilling laugh and delivers his final message. Tell your gendarme nephew that it was translator left from the naval command who took your liquor. If he wants to fight about it, tell him. Datalo. Be waiting for him right at the front gates of the base. He orders his men to hoist the massive barrel onto the motorcycle, and they ride back to his family home in absolute and lawless triumph. That night, Chang-Bao pours a brimming glass of premium spirits for his ascetic father, feeling a deep, intoxicating rush of street justice. He had beaten the bullies at their own game. But the universe has a strange way of balancing the scales. Just hours after acting like a ruthless gang leader, a world turned upside down strikes Chang-Bao in the most visceral way possible. Late one night, after drinking, celebrating his victory with friends, Chang-Bao is walking back to his apartment, his expensive, tailored, executive wool coat wrapped tight against a blinding Siberian blizzard. Through the white curtain of falling snow, he spots a familiar figure struggling down the avenue, his elderly neighbor, an impoverished manual laborer named Yan the Fourth. Old Yan is a rickshaw driver, a man who pulls a heavy wooden passenger carriage with his own muscles just to buy scraps of food for his family. He is out in the dead of night, coughing violently, trying to secure one final fare. Chang-Bao, feeling a wave of compassion, decides to help his neighbor out and climbs into the back of the open wooden carriage, telling the old man to take him home. But they only travel 2 blocks. Suddenly, the wooden handles of the carriage swerve violently. Old Yan lets out a ragged, choking gasp, and Duck collapses, face first into a freezing snowdrift. He is burning up with a sudden, lethal high fever, his lungs giving out from the brutal winter wind. For our American listeners, I want you to visualize this image. Imagine a wealthy, top-tier Wall Street CEO dressed in a custom with a 3-piece designer suit, walking out into a freezing New York blizzard. He finds his elderly Uber driver unconscious on the asphalt. Instead of walking away to save his expensive clothes, the billionaire steps into the freezing cold, lifts the unconscious driver into the back seat, steps into the driver's seat, and begins manually operating the vehicle through the snowdrifts to save the man's life. That is exactly what Chang-Bao does. He throws off his official arrogance, drops his high-born dignity, grabs the freezing wooden handles of the rickshaw, and begins sprinting through the midnight storm, his leather boots sinking into the deep snow, manually pulling the heavy carriage containing the dying laborer all the way to the city hospital. He bursts through the emergency room doors, gasping for air, covered in sweat and snow. The hospital staff goes completely pale. Nurses look at this elite, high-ranking military official pulling a poor coolie, and they immediately assume Chang-Bao must have brutally beaten the old man in the such street. Chang-Bao ignores the accusations, reaches into his pocket. Tebia pays every single penny of the expensive medical fees out of his own wallet. It leaves an extra 10 wine on the nightstand, so old Yan's family can buy grain to survive the winter. As he walks back out into the quiet, snowy night, looking up at the black sky, a deep philosophical sigh escapes his lips. He mutters to himself, "What a God-forsaken world." everything is completely, utterly turned upside down. That was the haunting paradox of Harbin in the winter of 1941. A world where a man could be a corrupt collaborator by day, a violent gang enforcer by afternoon, and a saintly savior of that poor by midnight. The social order was fracturing, mutating under the immense, crushing weight of a global conflict. Cheng Bao's personal life was a web of contradictions, but the structural transformation around him was turning deeply lethal. He tells us about his tragic bank colleague, Wang Shengli, a small-time dreamer who married a fierce, wealthy woman named Hu Sijie just for her money, only to lose his mind years later over a land dispute and commit a horrific suicide drinking raw. The sulfuric acid inside the dark basement of the Harbin Railway Bureau. The world was swallowing people whole to manage the escalating military chaos. A terrifying new Japanese supreme advisor arrives at the base, Lieutenant Colonel Uchida Minoru. Uchida looks exactly like a ruthless, old-school Russian imperial warlord. He always has a warm, polite smile plastered on his face, but behind his eyes rests absolute calculating power. Cheng Bao, utilizing his survival instincts, immediately launches a campaign of what we call hemorrhoid diplomacy. He helps fix Uchida's custom boots, and when Uchida's wife falls ill with severe hemorrhoids, Cheng Bao tracks down a secret, brilliant, local, traditional Chinese herbal doctor to cure her condition, and even helps her locate premium dyes for her hair. Through these low-stakes, reward personal favors, Cheng Bao transforms into the supreme favorite, the untouchable Red Man, of the new administration whom no one dares to cross. But the flattery can only protect him for so long. Beneath the surface of the new army command, a catastrophic, bloody powder keg is waiting to detonate. An upcoming civil-military gala designed to project unity is about to transform into a horrific night of absolute slaughter. A massive armed military mutiny is brewing inside the barracks of this invisible navy, a crisis that will leave the snow stained red with the blood of dozens of officers. How many men will die in the darkness, and how will Cheng Bao navigate an absolute massacre where flattery cannot stop a bullet? Find out in Chapter 9. I thank you for listening to Orient Shadows Archive. If you are ready to journey into the deepest, bloodiest secrets of World War II, make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave us a review, and share this episode with a friend. Until next time, keep searching the shadows.